All right. I think it says we're live. So what's up, Elio? How have you been, sir? What you been playing?
Hey,
Happy almost winter. It's
yeah, right. It's coming up fast. I have been so obviously this year has been a lot of chaos and really hard and rough for me.
you've been doing a move and there's been a lot of stuff. Yeah.
That's the easy part. So like the first 6 months was crazy, but all that to say that the past month has been phenomenal. I finally moved into this new place, which is just wonderful, and I'm still getting everything set up. That's why I have a void of blackness behind me.
Void.
Yeah, so things are going really, really well right now, and looking bright going forward, which is even better. Yeah, in terms of playing, mainly right now, been mainly 14 and the Wild Monster Hunter Wilds beta, which I've been spending a lot of time on, and it's been, oh my god, it's so good. I am a weirdo, man. I have been playing. I've played every Monster Hunters game.
Okay.
Since I think Freedom Unite. Like I've been playing a long time. I've never liked the series. I've been playing a long time, but
the only one that I've touched is Monster Hunter World.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, this is really good. I had a lot of friends, even my brother-in-law was like, you got to go, play Monster Hunter. And then I was like, all right. I checked out World. It was on super discount. And I was like, okay, like I can see the charm in this game. It seems like it's a high quality game. But then also I know Rurkon, he was trying to get me to play Monster Hunter Rise, right? And so I checked out the demo and I was like, oh, I don't like this. Like I liked what World was doing, but I didn't like what Rise was doing. And I didn't know why. And I don't know enough about Monster Hunter to sit here and say, like, here's the technicals behind how one feels over the other. But I tell you, like, the biggest frustration I had with World was just the sheer amount of jank that it takes to actually get into a group and play with your friends. And so I treated it more as just a nice little, action RPG that I can kind of play. Obviously, the thing that kept me away from the series for so long was just the fact that it didn't have like XP. Like I wasn't going out and grinding and leveling up. All of your powers coming from, killing the monsters and making better equipment, which honestly, I think that it makes sense, but I still always am like, man, I wish I was getting some progression here in different ways. It does apply to your Palico and more. So when Wilds announced, and that was kind of the big news that I saw that was really exciting, is that and you even confirmed it, it's easier to get into groups. You can also party up with NPCs and go out hunting. And I was like, that makes it feel so much less of a, just a soloed experience. Like that's the thing I liked about Final Fantasy 15 is that you had a group. And so there was a party dynamic. And I do wish they had the Gambit system in 15. I think that would have been really exciting to see there. Then at the same time, and then you go into 16, it's like, yeah, you have a party, but it's really so individually character focused. So just having people around though, I think is a real nice thing.
There's like 12 things I want to touch on that. The first, the short log line for me, I think actually biggest, I wouldn't say biggest problem, but what I wasn't expecting to be a big problem that was a big problem for 16 was that lack of a party. Like you have great characters, you have awesome like friendships with like Sid, and that's great, and like all the different characters, but you don't have like a party. You don't have a group that like really goes on an adventure together as a group.
Yeah.
But the thing I'll say about Monster Hunter 2 is, so Worlds is interesting because Worlds, I agree with you on Worlds. Worlds is the first time they made it, I would say, the game user-friendly, which is funny because I agree that it's still like there's a lot of friction there, but compared to what came before, it's the first time that I could actually recommend the game to people that weren't there for that specific brand of weirdness Monster Hunter was there for. What Wilds has done, in my opinion, is done that again. It has taken the amount of polish that Worlds created and then put that polish in again in terms of making it accessible while still having Monster Hunter, the weirdness and specificity of Monster Hunter. I think part of what Rise struggles with, I didn't like Rise at all either, is that Rise is basically, if there's like two sides of polish that exist, let's just say broadly for Monster Hunter, World polished like half of the like the sphere,
Hmm.
And then Rise, instead of polishing the other half of the sphere and making a holistic sphere, polished the same half. So it's like it feels the idiot, like the like jank feels almost more janky, even though it technically should be more polished. At least that was my experience of it. And then Wilds actually feels like it's doing all the things that were great about World and taking it further. And I cannot, like, the amount that's just one, grouping up with people is so much better, and the open world's all great, but also the new thing called focus mode, which effectively is just you can more actively control your weapon and camera.
Yes,
It's
that's been so helpful. It's not lock on, and I was like, okay, like, and then I'm like, oh yeah, I like that doesn't exist until I wish that I was like, all right, I'm rolling around, I need to refocus. But you're right, being able to kind of lock that camera and thus direct my attacks more succinctly has been a real treat for me playing the beta.
Yeah, and it's still skill oriented, and I'm sure, like, I know a lot of longtime people who are a little bit not bemoaning, but they're like, you know, the game is friendlier, it's faster, it's kind of like moving in a direction that's away from its roots a little bit. And I know some old hats are a little bit, but as someone who's been playing Greatsword since the beginning, I mean, I've played a lot of different ones. My problem is I always miss by like 5%, right?
Yeah.
But what Focus does is now it's like you can be good, but if you miss by 5%, it doesn't matter. Like you can miss by 1%. If 1% miss is still a miss. Now, you can, like, if you're pretty good as a player, you can actually constantly engage in the game, and it's not the difference between huge swings of whiff or I did all the damage.
Right, exactly. I'm interested in checking out some of the weapons. So I've been rocking dual blades, and I like kind of that. It feels much more agile, much more fast attack. Yeah, exactly. And I'm just like, hitting, and then dodge, roll, hitting. And honestly, I have to say, like, visually, this game's impressive. I ran into a little bit of jank, and I ended up having to update my drivers, my graphics card drivers, and that seems to have solved the issue. And so when I was like kind of playing, I was like, there in the cutscenes and everything, there was just this like, hey, it felt like it just got unsynced with what was happening for just like a brief second, and then would catch back up. And so after updating the drivers, like, okay, that's good to go. For me, after having played the beta, I have to say, like, oh, I think I'm picking this game up. Now the question is that do I like what platform? Because it is cross play. But what we've seen, and honestly, what I'm kind of hoping for is that what we've seen on Xbox with Metaphor and with Final Fantasy, the Pixel remasters, they have it with Play Anywhere. So you can buy the game, and it gives you have the PC version and you have the Xbox version. And I was like, oh, I would very much enjoy sitting down and actually playing that and just having that copy, because Microsoft just recently announced November. Now that we're finally in the month of November, they're going to be opening up their cloud service to their games. I'm hoping that also translates to GeForce Now, because I just want to play what I want to play when I want to play it. Fantastic says Rise feels like it was too short. TBH.
That's not untrue. I mean, it's a more bite-sized package compared to, like, World feels like it's like an A, like we spent a bunch of time like creating like a big game. Rise, I don't want to, is a decent chunk game, but it feels like a game that was like made kind of for the Switch to like be able to like, Rise weirdly is kind of a return to old Monster Hunter in its scale, scope, and size, but it is also a push forward in that it is the most action-y Monster Hunter ever was. Like the amount of crazy stuff you can do and movement tech you can do, whereas like Wilds feels like it's moving back to World but taking a lot of the good stuff from Rise but not all of it, so that it can be this like good synthesis.
Did Rise have mounts?
Yes, it had the like dog mount thingy.
Was that the first time we saw mounts? Because again, I'm not going to sit here and say like I'm a Monster Hunter expert. No, I'm brand new. This has been a real treat, because being able to call my mount when because that's the thing when I'm in World. I was like, all right, the monster's running, and then it's like you're kind of just trucking along through the different area. And in this case, I was like, hit up on the D-pad. Here's my mount. Great. I mount up. I can attack on my mount. I can dismount.
Sharpen, drink stuff, swap your weapon. Like
I'm betting, and I haven't done it, but I'm like, I know that you can sometimes mount and draw. like jump on the backs of monsters,
I've done
etc.
Yeah,
it's like jumping from the mount to doing something like that, I think would be one of those moments where you're like, oh my goodness,
That's the easiest way to do it. As Greatsword, you just jump off and you can like hang in the air and drive, and you can down strike on it. And I've got on top of a bunch of Ray Dows that way, which are like the alpha predator for the Windswept Plains, the area you can do in the beta.
Well, let's go ahead and get into the show. Chris mentioned that unfortunately he got pulled into work. So did Mark. So it looks like it's just going to be the two of us with a nice little casual catch-up chat talking about games. Before we kick in the intro, we're going to just make this all a part of the podcast, by the way, because that's what we want to talk some more Monster Hunter. We want to talk about, obviously, Firewalk closing down. There's a lot that we're going to talk about today in terms of gaming news as we get and wrap down 2024. But maybe check your mic. I don't know if you're actively using the correct mic. You sound fine, but I was like, and it does feel like I'm getting more of the room. So I'm going to go and run the intro and I'll let you check a look at that, and we'll be right back. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Crystal Core Radio Podcast. Brian and Elio here talking about all that has been going on. This has been an interesting year for video games. We opened up the show. We decided to run the intro a little bit into the show itself because we opened it up with our thoughts on Monster Hunter Wilds. Coming off of, me not really enjoying the demo of Rise and deciding not to pick that game up. The other thing weird about Rise was namely that it came out on Switch first and then eventually rolled out to other platforms. So I tried it on Switch, didn't have a good experience. And then by the time it came out on, PC, I was like, I've already moved on and I'm checking out other games, and not having this huge connection into Monster Hunter. It wasn't that driving force because I'm still a complete noob about it. So Elio, welcome to the show. We both have been enjoying Wilds. You are my Sherpa when it comes to Monster Hunter for this show. But there's a couple of themes that are going on that we just kind of covered. But I'm going to give it to you, sir. What are you doing right now? What's going on in your world?
Yeah, right now I've been moving, so I've been dealing with that a whole bunch. So obviously that's why you'll notice my audio is a bit echoey and everything's getting set up here. That's exciting. Currently getting back into full production for Areas and Archives and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Got patch 7.1 coming out. Beyond
That's
that,
out here next week, right?
2 weeks, 12.
Okay. Oh, wow. How long was that? So let's just talk about that time gap, because I would argue or articulate that this would feel like the biggest gap since we've seen when Heavensward launched before, from the expansion patch to the 0.1 patch. We're looking at it came out late June, basically July, August, September, October, November. I guess that's 4 months. I guess that's 4-ish months, 4.5. So
it was early December for Endwalker release, and it wasn't until April that we got the patch. Okay. So it looks like this is basically contiguous with, looking at this, it's the same as Endwalker.
Yeah, you're gonna have a lot to cover. I'm really interested, especially having not yet played Dawn Trail, but looking at once I finish my weight loss journey. And getting to the point, because they're showing off. I know Dynamis, we've heard the music, it's like I've seen the tweets, around the world. And so I'm like, I'm interested to see how they implement Final Fantasy XI, because the deep story would be the wish, the pie in the sky is like, just remaster 11 in Final Fantasy XIV's engine, and just make it all a part of let the player choose what kind of game they would want. And that would be so freaking amazing.
Yeah, that's the hope. What it seems like we're getting for the Alliance raid, based off of what they just showed off in the trailer, is that it looks like the first one is going to be a combination of the core game and the Rise of Zillar expansion, because we get maps from both of those and the enemies from both of those. We get the Archangels, Fafnir, the Shadow Lord, Prish, which Prish is more Chains of Promathia, but she could be a thing later. So it looks like they might do all the expansions throughout the 3 walks, this kind of the broad story.
Okay.
Yeah. Also looks like they're doing kind of like what they did with Evil East, where they might be interpreting the history of 11. So it might have been a place that a version of it existed, either in a reflection or in a place in Tyrol in history, not the actual 11, but broadly its story.
That's going to be interesting to see. So I'm really hoping that kind of hits pretty strong, because that's something that I was like, oh, okay, that that's what I want to see for the future of that game. But bringing it back to Monster Hunter briefly, because we brought up the idea that with Rise did a staggered release, and Worlds came out, I think, across all platforms, and Wilds is coming out across all platforms, right?
When Worlds first came out, it was console first, and then it was like I think 6 months or something, and then it was
to PC.
It was it might have even been a not until like Iceborne dropped. It was like I just remember it was offset because the big deal of
Your mic completely just died on you, by the way. Yeah, I was like,
better?
I could. Oh yeah, absolutely better.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on there. I got a lot of stuff to figure out. Sorry.
Windows that has an update on my PC. I'm like, oh no, gotta go make sure all the sound settings are like. I think somebody was like, your voice sounded weird in that video, and I'm like, gummit, they got me again.
Add that to cable management, making sure that all the cables are like, is this the data one? I don't know, but
yeah.
But no, yeah. So Wilds is it's a big deal. It's the first time that they're doing everything day and date.
That's so huge for
very
them.
exciting. Yeah,
I think what we've seen though, like that's one of the things I talked about in one of my latest No Rest for the Wicked videos, is the concept of this third-party exclusivity. I would argue we don't have a true A/B test, but when we look at Final Fantasy XVI's reception on PC, yeah, it put some numbers up on the board. But I think and would think that those numbers would be much, much, much higher if it just had come out on like PlayStation. Even if it wasn't like we're going to every platform, right? Like, okay. But I think what we're seeing right now, especially with like whether we want to call the Dragon Age Veilguard like a success or not, I've seen, depending on people's side in this fight.
It's too early to say.
It's absolutely too early to say, but everybody's trying to like, oh no, and then using Monster Hunter to try and score points as well. It in and of itself is like,
be thoughtful, people, not reactionary.
And when we're looking at this like specific, is that Veilguard is the first one that's actually like launching on Steam. Like we're seeing more of a movement. We're seeing Ubisoft saying, yeah, we're not gonna be doing this Ubisoft play. We're going to go to Steam. I even got a message today from Embers of Drift. Apparently something went wrong with their billing system, and so they're making some changes, and they're coming to Steam as well. And it's like people are here, people are playing it. I think that ends up giving people, not launching, on that. Your marketing dollar does not work as hard. So somebody was even saying like, I didn't even know that Final Fantasy 16 was released on PC, and I was like, well, I'm sure they spent some money, but I don't.
They did, but it's not the same.
I don't
way.
think they're right. Exactly. Because when you have that market, and that's where I think, especially with Wilds will be another, I think, kind of test when we're seeing these games just, hey, here's the game. Here's the marketing spend. Hype drives, I think, a good portion of sales beyond anything else. What do you think?
Well, and I think here's the thing. Look, Square Enix is going to be more my wheelhouse, but I do think as they long time, like Sony, like or long time, they've been like very, very close with them. It is really telling that after 16, they not immediately, but you specifically saw comments from Yoshi P and other people like, hey, we're going to be trying to launch on all platforms now. We're going to be moving toward like Yoshi P has been pushing for that post 16, and he's usually a pretty good litmus test for someone who is both in the industry and also understands the writing on the wall and trying to implement it ahead of time.
Because he wasn't wrong when he said that it is difficult to do that, because it is so much easier for them to focus in on. And that was a kind of a big point of it, is like, we're launching this on PS5. We're working with, really closely. They're definitely, I cannot imagine a world where they would have done that and there wasn't some kind of timed exclusivity deal, right? We won't ever have, we won't really have those informations about what that actually, paid them. But that was also a big part of it, marketing. And I think what we're going to see is when it comes to the console wars, is a bigger push, a bigger fight for marketing rights. Who actually has the right to market that this game is on their platform? And we saw Xbox pick that up with Metaphor. And that's where it's like, it's interesting because marketing has both a positive and negative impact on gaming. When I see gamers really mad about a game or something, right, where they're just like, oh, this game sucks. Honestly, every time you drill into it, for me, I'm sure there's some exceptions. It actually is that the marketing misled you. The marketing let you down. It was the marketing that really kind of, set you back.
We can macro that, right? Like it's not all the time, but most of the time, like 99% of the time or 95% of the time, expectations, right? Is the problem. So if marketing is what's setting most people's expectations, then of course it's going to be marketing is going to lead to a lot of conflicts there, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it's going to be interesting. I'm really looking forward to Wilds because it seems like they've addressed some of the core issues that I had with World. It's going to be a new game. It's that action RPG, which I really have been falling more in love with. It skill based. When it's all said and done, this really kind of, I think my time with No Rest for the Wicked and has actually helped me out dramatically in my skills with these games because it just it helps out. And I'm like, and then you still have a lot of like pedigree. So honestly, I think if for some reason I will get it on Xbox if it's Play Anywhere. So I'm kind of looking into that to see if they're going to do some kind of thing like that because that just gives me more flexibility. Go ahead.
There was a comment specifically by the director, and I'm paraphrasing, but I think he specifically said we did not architect it to be able to change your save cross console or cross because that was a complication that we just did not have the resources to take care of. So whether it's Play, it doesn't look like you can change your saves across. Now I don't know if they'll find a way that like with Microsoft that you can somehow do.
Microsoft handles that. Like that's kind of a core component. That's where when Metaphor and when Pixel remasters were like Play Anywhere, I was like, oh, I'll just buy them here because we have Xboxes, we have PlayStation, but we also have PC, and it's really great because I can boot up my progress on my PC for Final Fantasy or for Metaphor, and it's there, and then I can be downstairs later and I can do that. I don't have that flexibility with a lot of other platforms at the moment. And it is like, I think we're seeing a massive shift from Microsoft away from day and date with Game Pass. They have it in their ultimate tier. We'll have to see if that ever becomes something that's not true. But their new standard tier is going away from it. And we're starting to see, at least if nothing else, that push into Play Anywhere, which for me, I was like, that is their special power. That is their unique advantage.
That was always their advantage, in my opinion.
And they were only doing it for their first party games. And so, because like with Yoshi P and what they're saying, yes, if Final Fantasy 16 comes out on Xbox and it's Play Anywhere, I think that's going to be what we're going to see more from Square Enix, which I don't think is a bad thing. I think them putting their games in more places is the right call. With the exception is, and when we see these people getting points for third-party exclusivity, it's like Sony, just buy the company. Like if you're going to just lock down these games from all these other platforms, just buy the company. And I think I can get over that. Like I think I can just be cool with that. Not like I'm cheering that kind of thing on, but just like, okay, well, oh yeah, they're a first-party Sony studio. Checks out. Like,
I guess my thought, like the trade-off there is that I think if you're thinking in the shorter term, I'd agree. But I think in the longer term, the thing is you have stuff like Square Enix was mainly a Nintendo company throughout like the 80s and early 90s, right? And then goes to Sony. Like the thing is, as long as Sony doesn't buy that company, right, and Square Enix has some autonomy, there's more room for things to alter and shift over time. So while in a meaningful way, you could argue for other than like Dream Drop Distance for Kingdom Hearts, like most of the stuff they're putting out is like either Sony exclusive or Sony intended. There's now room for that to shift. I also think that one of the reasons we ended up in the state we did is that the last time before now that Square Enix really tried to do multi like console, other than 14, which is a unique case because of Yoshi P having more control there, but was 13. And the 360 version of that was in most perceptions for them a failure, from sales to the discs to the I think what happens is when they learn a lesson, it takes a long time for them to realize things have shifted, right? So it's like, yes, trying to do multi-console for you in 2008 didn't work out well. It's also 2024 and the entire landscape of everything has completely shifted.
Yes. And in that shift, that's where like we're seeing also gamers in droves, I would say, shift. The PC gaming experience isn't for everybody, right? Like I know a lot of people will say PCMR. Yeah, okay. but not everybody wants that experience. Like there is a beauty in the console curated. I don't have to troubleshoot drivers. It plays the game that I want to play. Yes, it's not at the maximum fidelity, but I'm also not spending, $3 to $5 grand to get that that level of output and power in my game. And so I think there's always going to be kind of that ecosystem. But we are, in my mind, seeing also a continued shift into PC gaming as people do end up investing in that device for their home. I think obviously the pandemic was a huge push for that because a lot of more people were home, working from home, and it's like, okay, let me go ahead and justify it. I'm working on this computer all day long. Might as well have a good graphics card so I can play games on it. And then with the advent of cloud, where the architecture behind it, like when we start thinking about how these games get deployed, is you're not having to create individual packages. That's one of the reasons why we don't see Pixel Remaster on the Xbox One. We don't see Final Fantasy XIV on the Xbox One, even though the equivalent, the PS4, is still running those games. It is kind of this way forward because that's one less release that they have to prepare for, especially because they have the Series S and Series X. What's up?
QA testing is real. It takes time. It takes money. And you can't even just throw the money at the problem of QA testing either, right? You have to have people, if you want to do it well and quick, you need to have people who are skilled, and skilled takes time to foster and create.
Do you think AI is going to have any kind of impact on QA testing?
It will have an impact. Having worked in QA, it will definitely have an impact if used correctly. Knowing the way the entire system is set up, it's going to be used incorrectly and in really inefficient ways for the better part of a while. Just the reality, the ways in which people use Jira in bad ways alone.
I hate Jira.
Here's the thing. I'm not trying to be a doomer about it, but because I do think it can be used as a useful tool, especially if you give QA testers and senior QA testers autonomy to use it. While also having a structure, so you're not just having everyone writing completely different bug reports that are, you don't want that.
Yeah.
But I can foresee uses for sure.
Sponge says one could argue that the QA testers have been the consumer or the customer for the last 6 years. I think
there's,
if it's not true, it's not 100% true, but it feels incredibly true.
It feels incredibly true. It feels incredibly true because what is being brought out is especially ever since things could go gold without really actually having to be realized. And part of that's from the fact that things could be updated. Part of that, there's a bunch of reasons for that, but it's more that the thing is a bunch of QA testing work is going into these things before they're coming out. And it's not even necessarily that they don't have the manpower, but it's the rise in complexity of games, while also the tightening and the either increasing or remaining the same of budget, often increasing in terms of budget in order to create anything of scale or scope, then increases complexity, which means more points at which things can go wrong. I did some QA testing for one of the early Black Ops, and then I did QA testing for the Modern Warfare one, when they redid it, right? And just the difference of a couple of years, the amount of weird lighting glitches and all sorts of stuff alone. So yeah, I think there's a certain element to which consumers are being released a product that then is fixed later, and by dint of that, effectively they're operating as a pseudo QA. But it's not true that they stopped doing QA. I think one of the reasons why we end up seeing that, and because there seems to be this first to market, kind of mindset, and why you see this MVP being pushed, because if you can get to market first, even if it's, not complete, you can truly dominate it. And I think Destiny is a great example of that, really first to market. People didn't know what the game was. They described it as Halo meets Borderlands. But now in today's world, you describe these games, these looter shooters, these persistent or these shared worlds as a Destiny-like, in this regards. And so having that out the gate, I think it ends up being that risk versus reward calculation. Well, if we wait, if we refine it, if we make sure that it's perfect, we're going to miss this boat. And nothing I felt missed the boat bigger than Concord
And the big news around Concord again, and maybe the final news, maybe the final song and update about that game is they shut down Firewalk Studios. Sony had spent over $400 million on this game. They spent more on acquiring the studio.
If the numbers are to be believed, which
yeah,
I do,
honestly, yeah, like I'm like, yeah, it checks out. Like how many years? And so being something where it's like if you want to try and really work on your game, we admire that when it works. But when you miss, like you're talking, people are making these $100 million bets on these games, and they're Concord didn't pay out. I think this year has been it's been like very bipolar in that regard. Some games are just like astronomically successful, like Pal World, and then you have obviously Concord, like in such a way that I cannot in my mind think of a game that has come out at that caliber that has done so poorly.
Well, I don't think there is. Like I don't think there's a historical precedent for Concord. Not necessarily that there's probably not, like economically there might have been bigger flops in terms of video games. We're talking specifically in the realm of video games. Like there's not, but in terms of video gaming, the way in which the scope and scale of what it was and put out, and the level to which it failed, and the quickness with which it was removed, where you were getting physical copies on the shelf like the same day it's going offline. Yeah. Right. There's not to that degree. Like there's things you get analogs to it. And just Concord. One thing I would point out is that it seems like a big swing, right? The difference between Pal World and Concord. But I bet you that other than, I bet you look at the past like 5 to 10 years, and you can probably see if you take the two endpoints of the largest failure and the biggest success, I think while there is some disparity that's growing, I think that there's been some truth to that gaming has been a wild, like ups and downs for a while now,
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, just think about something like Hades, right?
Yeah.
And like its wild success, right? I think or I'm trying to think of another, bigger failure, but anyways.
I'm sure we'll think of some. Now, Sponge in chat says, so leaning into our conversation around AI, do you think AI will help with QA going forward? If scalability and cost is a concern, how could AI be leveraged to produce a better product? What do you think? Because I have my own answer.
Yeah, and I'm sure as a software engineer, you're going to have probably a better technical one. But to broadly give a conceptualization, right? If AI can be used to better the tools that can do rough passes of the basic bugs, and to help also then that's one thing, right? And that could be, there's also, or like basically you create AI players that can do generalized player tasks that can, so then instead of not just like software and looking for things, but like also like you have, not hardware, but you have that effectively a pseudo faux player acting somewhat like a player doing playerly things, looking for ways in which things could break. So there's ways you could get with that there. And then another thing, and this may sound crazy, but literally just having AI helpers be able to have, if you have a QA software engineer who's pretty good, but is crap at writing up bug reports, because writing specific, very formatted bug reports is an art, and it's a science all to itself, that some people are great QA testers, but not great bug report writers. That would be me. If you have AI that can help people, you basically they can talk to it and then it can format that in a way that's useful.
Yeah.
That actually might be also useful. Just as some examples.
So I think one aspect you nailed right out of the park, I think training player data. So all of a sudden you can run endless amounts of scenarios based off of real players and how they engaged in previous games. Like, and it really kind of starts with where I like the Forza Drivatar system. Like I'm racing and it's got like, hey, and it's kind of learn from how you race, and thus it's going to kind of act like you act. Obviously it's not one-to-one, but I've also kind of wondered like, yeah, like that's an interesting kind of tool. That's an interesting kind of concept. And I wonder if we'll see more games do that as well. Think about it in terms of like, if you're going to play we were talking about Monster Hunter partnering up with NPCs. Imagine if that NPC was a placeholder for your friend and they played with the weapons and the gear and the style.
Everybody's getting a mimicked here.
Yeah.
Have you played Elden Ring?
I've been playing Elden Ring. I've gotten a couple of bosses down, but I have not beaten Elden Ring. I really have enjoyed it. but I keep finding, with limited time and so many great games that I'm enjoying. Okay, like, yeah, I'll get back to it. I'll get back to it. I keep jumping back into like No Rest and into New World.
This makes me think of one thing to explain that I think some people misunderstand. QA testing is not just about solving every bug. QA testing, it is very easy to find bugs. It is very easy to find a lot of bugs. It is very easy to find edge case bugs that no player will ever see because there's no way someone is going to interact in the game this way. Or at the very least, it's one person who does one thing and it's congratulations, it's a visual glitch, right?
Yeah.
Software can be great at finding those sometimes. But that doesn't actually help you when really what matters is how people are playing 99.999% of the time and solving for those issues. So if AI can help so that we're from like a software first pass side, having normal player behavior being gauged and solving almost all those bugs, there can still be like a whole host of extreme edge case bugs, but that if they're not affecting 99.9, if there's almost none or none of the player base is ever engaging or interacting with them, that's still better, right, than the current system where like half the time you're solving things that just aren't even, they don't actually matter. They matter. You don't want any bugs, but they don't matter.
I think you also had a good point about writing up bugs, because if you have the right tool, it could truly event log everything that happened. And then essentially when the bug occurred, writing that up in a summary. And so you would end up having more clear, succinct stuff for the programmers. But then that goes to the next level as well, to the point where will we hit a point where the AI actually goes and fixes the code in a semi real time method? It's like, hey, we ran into a bug, run it back. What went wrong? Okay, now we're going to deploy a fix and see if that actually addresses it. I think that could be something that could be a huge time-saving, kind of just process.
No, I think it could be. I think the thing is you need to be like, one, you would have to have multiple people overseeing that process in the short term, right? Like you would still have like, what's the term? Not code checks, but like, you wouldn't want the AI pushing, a whole bunch of stuff.
Right. There's definitely going to need to be checks and balances in there because.
But the thing is it's, if you make it so effectively more of the AI is doing certain code monkey work and you're having what effectively is a manager coder, right, overseeing that, like, okay, I see it did solve this. Okay, cool. That's work. We can implement that. There are benefits, right? It absolutely could be used in helpful ways. And there's also going to come complications with that when like you have, workforce complications, the same way that like I am not happy Ubisoft, for instance, is going through what it's going through right now in terms of the workers, right? And the Ubisoft basically seems like it's falling apart right now.
It is right now.
But I am happy that there's a bit of a message being sent about like people already have enough stuff to do that like just putting stuff out and trying to be first to market is not actually panning out. Like, I'm happy for that, not happy for the cost that comes to the worker.
It's going to be, I think it's, going into 2025 as we look forward to the new year, like there's so many things at play, and you hit it out of the park. There's a lot of backlog games that people have that are better than the games that are trying to get out there and become first to market. Right.
That's not even like the other media.
Well, it's not even just media. Like I just kind of look at it and say, this year alone, I can't even seem to find another hour, a day. And that's a lot of the changes that I've personally put on myself. I tweeted this out just the other day because Llama Todd, 2 years ago had his stroke. Also, Hogue Law had his stroke. We're all me and Llama and Todd and Hogue are all the same age. And that scared me. And so I was like, okay, well, what are these guys doing? And they're, you get in this mindset of, got to go grind, you got to go provide, you got to do this. And I was like, all right, I'm not going to be playing video games at night. I think that's a simple thing. That's like, I made a lot of changes and it's paying off. Like I shared that right now. I haven't officially weighed in because I only weigh in when I kind of go in for checks because I don't want it to be a mental, like a whole thing. Because I'm like, no, I know I'm losing weight. I'm good here, but over 80 pounds.
So much more important to like,
also,
hey, congrats.
Sleep. Yeah, thank you. But sleep, going to bed, not being up at late at night, pushing caffeine into my bloodstream, like I was like, all right, I'm gonna change things up. And turns out that's where I spent like most of the time where I was able to play games. I got a message from a friend. It was like, hey, what server are you on New World? I want to do the raid. I was like, I want to do the raid too. When do you normally play? And they said evenings. And I'm like, I've got some bad news, because that becomes such an exception than the reality of kind of balancing all of that together. I was like, Sunday afternoon. Yeah, I play on Sunday afternoons. Tend to play on Wednesdays, but I just got assigned to a new team at my job, and so I'm just drinking from the fire hose this week. So I was like, I haven't done nothing. I haven't hit live. I haven't Brian, I was like, I wanted to make sure I put some time into Wilds, so I did push it a little bit late last night when the kids were all doping up on the sugar from Halloween. It's like, okay, well, while y'all are distracted, I'm gonna go play some Monster Hunter and see what's going on with this. Yeah. So
I think that's also why I think there's more. It's hard because it maybe just be my perception. There's more people like us like that because I'm getting older. So it's like, yes, my circle's like that. So therefore the world's like that. Right. But I do think there's more people who are more conscientious with their time. And I think you're seeing that reflected in that more and more games are kind of being designed that way. Even the ones that are being dealt with like time gates or whatever, you're still seeing it's not the way it was about 10 years ago when it was really bad.
Yeah,
it's starting to ease up a little bit in the broader, I feel like. But man, I will tell you what, sleep is the one thing where it is annoying to hear over and over again because everyone who knows will tell you sleep's important, gotta get sleep. But it is number one.
It's something, and you don't need to say your age, but it's something that I see as gamers get older. Like in your 20s, it just I can stay up. And then it's like in the 30s, you're like, there's a cost here. It's like
I'm at 29, so I'm seeing the cost. I'm at the horizon of the cost.
All of a sudden, you're like, I don't know if this check is worth, writing. Because it's like, how am I going to feel tomorrow? And then it's like, once I crossed into the 40s, I was like, no, there's just I can have a great day the next day, or I can just absolutely especially with young kids. There's no day off. There's no calling in this sick. A sick day is still having to take care of little kids, despite how you feel, because they need to eat. And we don't want them turning on the stove. There's all right, we got a security issue here. So, but yeah, after obviously with Lamentad and Hogue, and I was like, okay, I'm going to make some fundamental life-changing decisions, and it's been paying off. But sleep, I tell you, it's the hardest thing because it's. I heard a priest tell me this once, and it was fascinating because I was like, oh my gosh, it's so true. He's like, sleep, it's the one thing you don't want to go do. And then when you're sleeping, you don't want to stop. You don't want to get up. Like, why am I getting up? And so it's like, you don't want to go, but then, and so he equated it to it's an ultimate trust in God, because you're like, I'm going to set down the things that I need to do and trust that tomorrow will come and that I can go and do those things that I need to do. So I was like, oh, that's an interesting way to kind of think of sleep from a philosophical level. So yes, gamers have less time. I think also, I don't know if, you've been really busy, you've been talking about moving, but I don't know, I just feel like over the course of the last couple of years, there's just been more, go faster, do more, get, go. And it's like, by the time, especially because this year, I've been coaching T-ball and doing all this stuff with the kids. That's where I'm really having a lot of fun with the time, but that's a big time sink, so it's like, there's just one thing after the other. And it's, and I find myself going, if I have a bucket of, I used to probably have about 8 hours a week. Right now, I probably have about 4 hours a week, maybe a little bit more, especially if I'm, playing COD with Julie or something like that. Yeah. That's where, what game am I going to put that bucket? Where am I going to put that time into it?
You got to be selective. So you're not going to just buy willy nilly. So you're going to look, the older I get, and I don't know how many other people agree with me, but I feel like the more I talk to people lately, I feel like I know more and more people are like, give me a really excellent 4 to 8 hour game over a pretty good 60-hour game, whereas I remember it at the amount of time, 10, 20 years ago, the amount of time a game could provide you was a selling feature, one of the predominant selling features, particularly in the aughts. like I remember like the fact that like this game has like 80 hours of game, like
Yeah.
you know,
As a kid, it was like 80 hours. Like, this is great. And then, like, I think was it like Hellblade 2 or whatever. It's like, it's a 10-hour, game. I'm like, that actually sounds kind of nice.
give me a good experience. Yeah.
It's same thing with TV, right? Like,
Yeah.
when I look at like the different series that come out, it's like, if the story doesn't need to be 10 episodes and only needs to be 6 episodes, just make the 6 best episodes and go from there. Because one of the things that you look back at, like old TV that was on and broadcast,
the 24 episode every season, 22 episodes season, yeah.
And then in that story, there was perhaps like 12 that were really moving the plot forward and what's going on. And then there was like the offset, which was like, this is just the filler of the week.
Creature of the week.
Creature of the week that is like, it's not truly like and you never hear from it again. And so it was like, but we got to fill in that time. And now with streaming, so there's like, I think, benefits in that. So them within a like a narrative story. I've been playing through Final Fantasy VII Remake. I set that down because I've been playing through the Pixel Remaster and playing through Metaphor a little bit outside of COD. Like, there's like, I just put a little bit of stuff in each bucket. That's why I'm so thrilled that Monster Hunter is literally coming out in February. I was like, that actually is perfect. It's going to be cold here in Texas. We had a hot October. I don't know if anybody
up here too. Yeah.
I was pissed. October is the month that I'm just thrilled. And I'm out there sweating. Like, I won't, I'll try to not keep it crude. Just sweating out, doing T-ball with the boys. And I was just like, good Lord, I thought we were done. And it's like, and then we'd have like a little hint of fall that would sneak in. And then it's like, and then by the weekend it would get like, completely crushed and moved out of the way. Just goodness gracious. Anyway.
Yeah.
I'm so pissed about that.
Just back on Wilds, like one thing I'll say, like playing it lately, one of the things that just came to me, and this is kind of like that basic litmus test of just like, it's just fun. Like, just not like, one, I love overthinking things. I love being thoughtful about like games and blah, 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 but just like on a fundamental level, it's just fun. Like, it's like, and that's something I have had. I wouldn't say I've necessarily even felt as, again, having played almost every Monster Hunter, I don't know that I would necessarily have said I think any of them are fun. But this one, the changes with this one in particular, I find are making it so that it's just fun, because there's less punishment. Well, there's still punishments, but you still have to be very like intentional. But there's more room, right? There's that wiggle room as opposed to before when it's like, no. Once you sing that greatsword or once you fire that bow gun, you're like, it's that is your line. Whereas now when you play on heavy bowgun, you're basically playing a third-person shooter.
I need to check that out. Like, again, I want to spend some time with the different weapons. And so I'm really looking forward to that. And I've been seeing Chili, we were talking about it earlier, Chili in chat, as saying, did I see all the new Final Fantasy XI stuff? I've been seeing y'all tweet out about it, the dynamic music, obviously the images and the video kind of,
it looks like Juno is like in the realm of Dynamis. Like it's the Archangel gear, the like, I'm curious if we're going to get Mr. Zillar as the final guy. Cause we with between Fafnir, the Archangels.
That's what I'm
Shadow
looking
Lord
forward to. Like once I lose the rest of this jiggle, so still like, I was hoping to be done by now, but it's like, all right, let's just keep plugging away.
Keeping on.
I'm looking forward to kind of playing through it, because when it comes to Final Fantasy XIV, we'll have this kind of as our final little topic, because now that enough time has passed, I see basically the review of the current state of Final Fantasy XIV as this: the content is great, people are split as all get out over the story and the characters in the story, and it's like that was like in my mind. I was like, yeah, of course, this is exactly what.
Thank you. That's what I've been saying. Like, but every time someone's like, no, it's like this is almost always how it is. Like,
I think we've like, from a psychological perspective, because I was pondering all of this stuff back in like Stormblood, and I was like, here are the issues that the game has, and if these issues aren't addressed, they're gonna just get even bigger to the point where it becomes impossible to ignore. And we all know that the certain aspects of the community doesn't like, any kind of critique. It's either perfect or shut the hell up. But beyond that, we've seen that continue to play out. Now the story built up on itself. And so every chapter, was a new saga and it was exciting. And then it concluded, which is a massive amount of respect for the fact they did that. After that conclusion, you're going in a whole new direction.
You got to start again.
You got to start again.
You got to build up.
And no matter what, people were going to be like, I didn't like this.
Brian, thank you.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I was like, it's interesting to me, just as somebody who I don't consider myself, I'm not covering the game anymore. I'm just, as an MMO and somebody who I want the game to be incredibly successful. The thing that just brings me endless amounts of joy is usually when people like tag me. They're like, Ginger Prime was saying this 2 years ago, guys. 3 he was saying this is how it was going to be, and I was like, yes, I'm oddly consistent to the point where, yes, you might not like what I have to say, but I get more apologies than I think any other content creator that I know. When people come back, they're like, I didn't understand what you were saying, and I understand now. And I'm like, oh, welcome. Well, we can still root for the game to be successful.
Right. Look, I'm relatively speaking Mr. Cheerleader. I'm very pro on Dawn Trail. I tend to be, even when I don't like something, very thoughtful. And I'm very thoughtful. I like thinking about being like, okay, why was this just right? Like I am overly positive, right? I will say. But even I'm like, that's what I've been saying. Look, there was always going to be one coming off of the back of not Endwalker, whether you necessarily liked it or not, was broadly seen as a good finale, right? And so, if you're starting again, there's going to be that. If you're trying to change it up, people forget that there were a lot of people who are negative on Shadowbringers. Like Shadowbringers is widely, I would say, considered the most pro one.
Yeah, Shadowbringers solved problems with Stormblood for me, and I've stated this story numerous times. Is that I felt like Stormblood just literally didn't commit. They were like, it was like always like the concept and the threat of war with the Empire. And it never seemed
starting.
Right. And it's just like these little tiny skirmishes. And I was like, they are supposed to be like this all-encompassing force. And then there were stories of, various infighting that was, going on, which, okay, I get it. But like Stormblood, I felt was sold on that there was going to be this war, not a cutscene. And we got the war with Bozja and Zadnor. We got the war.
And Whirlwind. Right, and you got the Eastern and Western from with the trial series. Yeah,
yes, 100%. But we got that in Stormblood, and so it was Stormblood was this, deep conclusion to some of the issues and complaints that I had with Shadowbringers. We got that to Stormblood, and then with Endwalker, yes, it was a conclusion, and it felt like they pulled their punches. And so the thing that I was, the thing I was hoping for, though, because again, I get why they did it. Especially now that we see with Dawn Trail and going to the New World, right? I think it would have been much more advantageous to have a time jump, like a massive time jump. And you could have, cultivated that with another way so that the time jump would be so significant that new players could start out at level 1. You could have a whole new progression system and them going to 100. Like it also tells me that they're going to go to 110 and then we're going to see maybe a level squish if we don't see it from level 100 and whatnot.
So, yeah, I have like 1,000 ideas going off.
Please go ahead.
So one of which is that I think part of this is like an expectations thing too. Stormblood is interested in talking about Stormblood has a bunch of pacing issues. It's structured in basically like 4 acts where it's like Girabanya, Othard, Girabanya, and it stops and starts right as its momentum gets going. Like I don't like Stormblood has like discernible specific reasons that I think some people don't like as well as other reasons. But like Stormblood is interested in 2 nations that have been occupied by an invading force for 25 years. It's not. It is a story about the way in which war's legacy and the invasion of it affects the land and what it means to choose to fight back. Mm-hmm. Whereas most people think of it, I feel like going in, it's going to be a war story, right? It's going to be the war fight. Shadowbringers is we are bringing the fight to the fronts, right? In terms of the like patch content, in terms of like this is Stormblood, but you've got the battle. You do have the 4.4, 4.5. It's the battle of the Gimlet Dark. It is that major conflict. You have the war fight between Bosnia Zadnor and the well, it depends on whose perspective you're talking about, but in the east, and then you have Whirlwind in the west and moving in. And then Endwalker is not interested, the whole story, and even Whirlwind and Bosja are like this, but they're interested in the humanitarian and humanity and that quandary, not in the like omega, like the major, like let's have a big fight. And so because of that, I understand why people felt like going into like Garlemald is lackluster, because it's like, well, I would feel like I was promised a big fight, but we didn't. It doesn't feel like we got. It feels like a balloon deflated. I actually find that particularly resonant in the fact that it's kind of making a point about these are people, right? So to be ready to like fight that enemy that you feel you're ready, and to instead have to deal with a humanitarian crisis, I think is actually more resonant and more in line, specifically, like whether I like it or not. I think it is in line with the themes that the story as a whole has focused on.
Yeah.
And I think some people don't like Dawn Trail for similar reasons. I think Dawn Trail does that again. It focuses on those things, and people feel like it doesn't give the promise that they feel like it should because of that. There's plenty of other reasons. I'm not saying it's all about that, but I think that's part of it for Dawn Trail too.
That's a really good way to kind of approach it and think about it. I never really kind of thought about, like, obviously, because yes, we did that. There was a massive shift, and just the challenges, especially when you start thinking about indoctrination. So it's like, like, okay, are we? Oh, especially, and this is also, I think, if we're going to talk about it from what lessons we can learn in our real life, is dehumanizing language, against groups of people has devastating consequences. And in some cases, some of these NPCs, these characters, pay the ultimate price for that level of indoctrination, for, especially from Garlemald, labeling, thinking of everybody as a beast tribe and less than, and seeing
savages.
Shift. Yeah, savages,
the word they use.
Yeah, and that's a story. That's a tragic story of humanity within like our different languages, and how we justify things. We lessen their humanity, and so then it becomes people, and you see it time and time again. People just go along with it, and it's like,
easier,
okay,
right? And that's part of the point that like 14, like the thing is that like for a game that's a JRPG that's about fighting the songbird that's singing the death of the universe, right? The fact that it goes to great lengths to have a very grounded, meaningful conversation about like why Garlemald happened, what that ideology means, why some people choose to believe in it and fight for it, not just because they're bad people, but because it promised and delivered them something, and the chain of unity, right? The whole Garland thing. And to the game's credit, again, the patch content and into Dawn Trail, the game is having conversations about what is the future of Garlemald? What does it mean to not just we won the day, we saved the people, okay, cool. What does it mean to continue on past? How do you make sure that ideology doesn't rise again? How do you like 14 is deeply, for something that has to go pretty quickly, deeply engaging with these ideas, and I cherish it for that. But I also understand that I think the same fact that it's engaging with them is what's disappointing sometimes, because it can sometimes come at the cost of like the JRPG-ness, yeah.
Now, Chili writes in chat, he says that I still wish that Stormblood had added the besiege feature that we have with the Garleans randomly attacking Rogger's Reach, and then you would have to defend it. That would have gone a long way, Chili, in making my enjoyment of Stormblood much better, because it just felt like we kept punching this whole group of people in the nose that have been sold to us as like, these are badasses. You got Xenos. Yeah. And it never felt like we were getting hit back. Right. And it was like,
well, other than the one time, right?
The one time.
Like the sack of Rogger's Reach is like the one time that they kind of show that.
But imagine though, if it's like, okay, well, there is this conflict that's ongoing. And then, yes, you're in Rogger's Reach. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, we got to stop what we're doing, and we got to defend this. I get it. The challenge from kind of a technical and a narrative perspective is that you're going into this place, you're trying to finish this quest. And I think it's just sometimes when you can't do something in a game, that actually that shouldn't be completely avoided. When we look at, while games are more accessible, there is a risk of creating a game that nobody really wants, because it loses its kind of like core foundation. And when it comes to MMOs, that asynchronous multiplayer, that aspect that it's like, oh yeah, that NPC got knocked out and I need them to continue this quest. Okay, what do I do? And then you go on and like it reroutes you so that you can, save the NPC. And I think what we want in MMOs versus the difficulty of getting what we want, is causing a lot of the frustration and rejection of the MMO. Because Go ahead, please.
I was just saying, I think the difficulty is that the we is different, right? Because I think I am someone who loves like Guild Wars 2 that's very reactive like that in some ways. I love 14 in some ways that's incredibly static. But the thing is that 14 tends to put its eggs in the baskets that it wants to try and have success on, but it comes at the cost of like that some of that dynamism, right? The fact that it has gotten its pacing structure for the most part, or at least like how it wants to do maps, the 6 maps, it's gotten that down to a T, which is allowed to refine those things, but it comes at the cost of some of the exciting things that like New World does, and it's not just about spaghetti code, right? It's not just about technical limitations. Sometimes it's about like, okay, how are you going to create something? Like 14's interested in sustainability to maybe a fault, you could argue, but like the amount of players, here's a great example, I think, and this is not quite the same example of what you're saying, but the amount of players I know who just don't give a crap about duty support, right? At all.
Yeah. I hate how it's multiple systems. I hate how you have the
trust and duty support.
Trust, duty support, but also then you have before that the squadron.
Yeah.
And it's like make a unified system that I can level up my characters, or I could take storied NPCs. Like,
so to be fair, they are doing that with duty support now. So almost all. So they just at 7.1, they're promising that all dungeons are going to be duty supportable.
Right.
So squadrons is basically completely de facto unimportant. The reason they can't get rid of squadrons is there's some achievements and ranking up in the.
They can overhaul that, and we've seen achievements becoming unattainable through 1.0 to 2.0. So like,
apparently people did, but
what's up?
Some people did not like that because it not being able to. Yeah,
but then it comes to again, it's like, is like how many? Like if it's like 98% of the community is like absolutely not, then okay, fine, I will take the L on that one.
Well, do you want better
like
though?
One or like a handful of people, they're like, oh, I want to have this achievement. Well, go and get the dadgum achievement and stop holding it over our heads.
I'll do you one better though.
System. Yeah.
They with one of the achievements in I think for like the Rygo event or whatever, and some of the other achievements as well, they changed it that there was supposed to be like feast specific or like very like only specific ways you could get the PvP achievement. They tacked on crystalline conflict to that. So it's an achievement that used to just say one thing, and now it says that thing plus crystalline conflict. So what they could do instead is, even if they retire squadrons, say like you have to do like, they can probably we know there's precedent to alter them, right? So maybe that's one way to do it. I mean, they definitely need to retire squadrons. I'm with you on the like it being like 3 different systems is annoying. But the point I was going to make real quick about that is just
same
that
thing with the fates. Let me just I'm going to let you make your point, but the fates that they have these currencies in these expansions forward, and like just make a unified kind of system. But please go ahead.
To be fair, that is what bicolor gemstones is like. That is their unified system.
But they're not in ARR. They're not.
Yes,
in
they need to be
Heavensward.
Backwards. Yes,
I don't think
that
they're
is
even in Stormblood. I think it came in with Shadowbringers, and it's like I would love to see that system brought into ARR, Heavensward, Stormblood. Like, let's go.
I don't know anyone who isn't a fan of that. The neutral is the absolute worst I've seen, because I think that's a great idea. It make people go back and do old content. I think it's just a great idea. The only downside would be if someone found like weird ways to spam ARR ones and just do ARR ones constantly to like, but like that's solvable, right? That's not a big problem. What I was gonna say about duty support though is that the amount of players I know who have started playing the game, like Yoshi P said, the reason they were doing it in the first place is they did it like studies, right? They went and like figured out why people weren't playing 14. The number one thing was like fear of playing with other players, of it being multiplayer, of it like and with duty support, the amount of people I've seen start playing the game who because they felt like they could do it solo, who are now savage raiders, is over 20. So like clearly so doing things like that matters, right? But then the thing is that, so like by that same token, it's like having Ralgor's Reach being able to be besieged is a cool thing, and the inconvenience that can come from it for I feel some plays like totally worth it, right? That inconvenience is what creates the disparity that's like fun and interesting, right? But then at the same time, you have people who like want to be able to just like experience a narrative RPG, and and that tension is constantly at the heart of 14.
It is absolutely constantly at the heart. Like, and you really like hit on a good point, because like I would say right now with New World, they have wars and they have these invasions, and those systems have this. It's been out for a while. These are like the pinnacle PV, the war is like, but there's real stakes on the line. And so what ends up happening is that you have a lot of people who just like are interested in doing it, but there's no way to practice it. There's no way to kind of get some experience without getting slotted into the thing. And so it's like you have this mode that is for a very, very small amount of people, and you don't give anybody the ability to kind of go and get the training wheels and kind of see if they even like it for themselves. Now, the devs have talked about bringing in mock wars, which I think would be a huge win for the game, but we're all still waiting on the roadmap. The New World of Tournament just launched now on consoles. I've been seeing so many people enjoying that expansion, and so that brings me to the question that I'd like to ask you before we wrap up today's show. New World and Throne and Liberty console crossplay, right? That puts it right in line when you think about Final Fantasy XIV. ESO doesn't have crossplay, but we could start to extrapolate that. I think that we're with MMOs. If you're going to have market success, you have to push into the console space. If you don't, you're setting yourself up for people to just go back to the MMO that they're currently enjoying, which you get the console player base, which adheres to the trust system, which adheres to story narrative, because that's what people are experiencing it on it. But what 14 does, and what these other games don't do, is there's a subscription for that individual game. Do we see Square Enix ever make any adjustments? Do we see them make any changes? Do we see that barrier for entry ever shifting in your worldview?
I mean, look, if the game starts doing poorly, yes, I'm sure that's always on the table. Although I would imagine they'd be far more stubborn than they think. Here's what I'll say. Having played a lot of MMOs for over 20 years, I'm kind of thankful 14 has a subscription. I understand why that is a barrier, and I'm not arguing that it's not. But I would point out that the free trial now goes up all the way through Stormblood. So
but that's kind of my point. It's such a weird system because we know that Shadowbringers is coming because they just keep adding to the free trial. Yeah. I'm not knocking it. It just is very odd to me that if you're enjoying the free trial and you're like, you know what, $40. I'll go ahead and spend it, or 60. I'll go ahead and give them money. All of a sudden, you're locked into this forever, having to be.
Yeah, that's a bad system. That's just a silly system.
And it's like, I would be perfectly fine if they were going to say one of two things would change. Hey, you can't afford the sub right now. Now migrate and you can pivot back into that kind of.
Yeah, you lose access to the stuff.
You lose access to all the stuff that is current. Or essentially where it's like you could say, in order to be in order to play the new expansion, you got to be subscribed. But just like we said, with this expansion, you can still log in. You can't go into the zones. You can, if you're subscribed, you can do the current content. If you're not, you can still play through all of that. And and maybe you just don't have retainers. Maybe you don't have the ability to sell in the market and impact the economy. But you could still buy, from the market. But I'm just saying,
the nitty gritty of how you solve that is is I feel like, not that it's not really interesting, but it's you could argue for days, right? Whereas you don't, you'd have to really meditate on the second order effects and stuff. What I'll say is I'm thankful for the subscription because in general, not that there's not still a cash shop, it has
there has to be the subscription is still the same price as it was back in the 90s,
right,
to today. And guess what? My eggs cost more than my dang subscription to Game Pass now. And it's no, things had to change.
But the subscription feels like it had constantly proves and bears out that the game is financially viable in and of itself. And what that allows for is a level of stability and a level of, in general, what you would hope for, not $90 cash mounts of a certain company that still takes on subscriptions, but that's neither here nor there. But problems I care about, at least, I see a lot less of in 14, and in part, I think that is due to the fact that it has subscription. I don't know how you solve the problem of accessibility. It seems like with the free trial, people are having at least a chance to play, and then beyond that, I don't want to shrug and be economics, but it's the game is making money and people are playing it and broadly happy. Yeah, and so it's I don't see that
massive incentive to change. Why? I'm wondering if we start to see market pressure from other games.
11's not free to play,
right?
11.
But that's also kind of the point I was getting at, is that I think, or at least if nothing else, I think the biggest mistake Xbox made this year was when they increased the price of a Game Pass, but didn't really add any value to it. Yeah. And if they were to go and say, I think Game Pass is like $17, $18, for the Ultimate or whatever, somewhere around that price now.
It's not a bad deal. Like, but the perception, right? The perception's everything.
Right. But imagine if they were like, you know what, we're going to, instead of going to 18, whatever the cost is, we're going to go to 25 or hell, 30. And we're going to, in this Ultimate, not that it has to be in everyone, but in Ultimate, we're now going to include our World of Warcraft subscription for Ultimate members. And then right now, like you can play, on GeForce Now, World of Warcraft, but you got to be subscribed to the game. I think that would be very interesting if we ever see Xbox make a move like that. I don't think they have any incentive to do so. WoW has plenty of subscription, and I'm sure they love having people sub to Game Pass and more. But it would be something truly, truly interesting to see because when it comes down to it, like the only thing that I think shifts, because there's no incentive for World of Warcraft. There's no incentive for Final Fantasy to get rid of those subs, but I don't think you can launch a new IP specifically with the subscription. I don't think Lord of the Rings, the MMO, gets to launch with the subscription, and so
you could do what ESO does. I think you could launch a new game and do what ESO does. Yeah, I think you absolutely could do an optional sub, and I think honestly of the options that like cuts the middleman, it still obviously has problems, but I do think I think that might be the way to go.
Robert asks, Ginger, how do you play MMOs with the amount of time that you don't have? What it really comes down to is GeForce Now has been the lifeblood of my gaming catalog. It's like, I can boot it up,
playing all the
I can just pretty like sometimes we use that as like a retreat.
Yes,
like we just escape from the noise in the house. But what that allows me to do, like so I don't have a maxed out character in Throne and Liberty yet, but I ultimately kind of plan to try and have a character, and then it just becomes something where like I've done, these are the things that I'm enjoying doing. I go and do that. When I'm not enjoying it, I set it down. And being that I have long been concerned, even before all the Lamatad and all the strokes and all that, like I was always like, I have a massive concern for the fact is like I can't build my content around just one game and try to make that some kind of livelihood. So it gives me the ability that I can pick up a game and I can set it down, and whether the views on the content I make around it are good or bad, it's just the thing that I wanted to make, and then I'm happy. And so I can put in a couple hours a month into New World. I can put in a couple hours here and there. And I always have described it, even before we started having all the kids that we started having around here, was like, I'm just a guy who's going in and just chipping away a little bit at all these things. I'm not going to be first, and which is a real negative on the, we talked to first to market in this podcast alone. I'm not going to be the first to market. I'm not going to be that. But what I can be is I can talk to you guys about how I play these games on a controller and how that actually works. And it turns out that there's a lot of other people like me who have limited time, who want to just sit back, relax, and play like an MMO every now and then.
Most are.
And that's
the thing is, people underestimate that. Like, people have the perception that the hardcore intense people, that the amount of people who are spending their life, people like me with 14, right, is the average. And it's not. Like, me and you are the opposite ends of the spectrum, right? In terms of like, my one thing is 14, right? And you're right. It doesn't do great. If you want to be economically viable on YouTube, don't be stuck on one game. It is a terrible idea.
It's such a weird strategy, because I hear from consultants, because like they'll like occasionally get an email like, I can help you grow and whatever. It's like, all right, like I'll like, if you have a tip, and they're like, what you need to do is you need to niche down, you need to focus in on one game, and then you need to get over 100,000 subscribers, and then you can start to do this other stuff. I'm like, no. Like, I get that works for a lot of people, but I have a whole different, I'm playing a different content creation game.
But also, what all those people do, right? For the most part, is that they get to 100,000 and then they broaden. What they're doing is they're using a niche to create a baseline, to create a baseline of people who are engaged with them, so that when they broaden, they have people who will from others that they can build on that base. It's not actually because niche is the way to go. Well, take that from someone who does a niche. Like, well, I look at the numbers.
Yeah, like the problem with that is like, and this is where I've talked with like Chris and a bunch of guys, is there a market for the product that you make? And for lore, there is. With Final Fantasy XIV specifically, I have long been somebody who says there's a lot of people who will say they'll watch that, they want to watch that video, and then they don't show up for it. There's a lot of that. And I think that's not unique to 14. I think this is a part of content creation. And so that's where, from a consumer, because I also watch videos, I watch, I consume people's content. When I see people kind of complain, like it's the same, like it's just, and I was like, yeah, like, click on. Because that's what they click on. You click on, and it's like, and same thing with terminology. Like, it literally is like, if you want to get like almost to the point where I'm like, you should probably go study journalism and just how they title their stuff. Because I'll still get a comment every now and then, like, there wasn't any new information in this. Well, the video was filled with new information. It just isn't new to you, but the word new made you click on it because you're curious about the game. I cannot know what degree of engaged you are, but I can always tell when by that comment I go, oh, this is an engaged user. They didn't get anything from this video because they were also reading the tweets, they were also reading the Discord messages, they are fully informed. But then you see
they want more.
Right, but they want more, and that's why they clicked on it. That's why that word is so powerful. And then when we see that translate into like, and then 98% of the other comments are like, this is great, or oh man, thank you, this was interesting, I didn't know that, because and that's just the nature of it. So there's like interesting words that I've discovered over my life with content creation, that it's like, oh, use this phrase or say this in the title, and for some reason that just becomes, it's without like people going like, oh, you're clickbaiting. It's like, no, it's not, like, this is new information. But before I'd put something like dev updates, but now it's like, hey, dev share new information, and it's like all of a sudden it's like you get a much better response to that, because it invites both people in, as opposed to like dev share updates about conversation on Discord and on Monday. They're like, oh, I've already read that. And then YouTube's like, this isn't a video that we want to push out to people because no one watched it. It's like, okay. And
that just cascades. I've tried to avoid using those. I've tried to avoid using those words in the past. And at this point, I feel like I'm fighting an uphill battle of just like, know what? It's just like,
and that's the thing. It's like, if it wasn't so difficult trying to adhere to like the one negative voice in the comments, saying like, oh, you should. It's like, if it wasn't so much more effort, it is the path of least.
I would love to. Trust me, I would prefer to not say like 3 new lore tips on blah 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 blah. But the problem is it works.
Have you noticed also an interesting trend in which that odd numbers do better?
Yes, I have.
What is that? Psychology, man. Study
I don't know what it is. I could not tell you. But I have absolutely borne witness that something about like 3, 7, 11, like like it's
So I've been doing I've been basically kind of streamlining, and we'll wrap up after this. I love talking shop.
Me too.
The one of the things that I've been like doing is like kind of theming like the kind of the style topic. So I have state of the game, which I kind of do like deep dive number analysis, what's going on. But for my kind of reviews, rather than truly going into like, is this worth it? Like, I'll put those out on occasion because people are searching that as a phrase, but I'll do 7 reasons to play, 3 reasons to avoid. And it's in that I'm really enjoying both writing that series, because it allows me, because again, like you and I think we're we're definitely positive. Like I'm an optimist for the most part. I do have a cynical side that does creep in, and it's always at odds with my optimism and joy. But then what I see is like, well, yeah, let's talk about it. And this gives me 7 reasons from an optimist, positive perspective, but 3 things that people might be aware of that could influence their buying habits within a game. And so that's where it's like, I've had a lot of fun, and I'm finding some really good success with that phrase. And so it's been fun to see that people have responded to that series, because I have so much, like, it's always great when the thing I'm having fun doing is doing well, but it's also freeing that it's like, even if nobody watched this, it's like, I feel good that I put that out there and I can move on, because it's not all just internet, high school drama.
And like, it doesn't
who did what on Twitch? Oh my goodness. How do these, it's like, oh,
Twitter is not the real world. Like, I don't know.
I'm going to push back on that, because it is true, but when people like I've seen a lot of anxiety creep in because it feel like there's a feeling.
Oh, it feels like it.
It's like it's like you're shooting up diet soda into your veins, and it's like that is really happening, but the effects and all that stuff. So it's like I push back only slightly on that phrase because of the
I don't
fact
think that's pushback. Because it's the malaise and anxiety is real. My point about saying Twitter's not the real world is not a you shouldn't feel however you're feeling. My point is to point out that the perception that this is all of discourse is wrong. Right. That like the perception that any Reddit, Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, that is all of discourse, even if you took all of them and put them together as one thing, is still wrong. Yeah. Most people are tapped out of that. And I think I would still say most people are absolutely reasonable, but we've created an environment where we reward the extremes. And so it's like, and people will say the quiet part out loud, right or left. It doesn't really matter. Like somebody was like, why don't you do this? You know, and there was a video I was watching and the guy's like, well, if I do, I'm going to lose followers. I was like, that guy just said the quiet part out loud. The fact is like, there is a lot, I think a lot of people, you know, we're like there's nuance to all of these discussions, you know, but there's no incentive. There's no value because there's incentives not to. Well, there definitely, it's like you stay on message or you're off the team. And then it's like, you know, sorry, you made your full-time, you know, salary based off of this. So it is a real problem within gaming. My trick, my recommendation, and I think this is just true of consuming media. This is true. It's like don't maybe run to always read what everybody's thinking about it. Formulate your own feelings and thoughts first, then go engage with that. Just a general, but thoughtful, not reactionary. Like and it doesn't matter if everybody else is being reactionary. It's not about like, well, they're not, or it's just thoughtful, not reactionary. Because you may think long and deep and think, nah, still fuck that guy. But like, you know, but like at least
I would say, like thoughtful reaction, not reactionary, but honest. Like,
yes. I think you have to be thoughtful. You have to be honest personally.
Honest with yourself, honest with the situation. And it's like, and what I feel is like a lot of, like with access journalism and media that we're seeing, you know, like play out right now in real time. It's like, whether you want Dragon Age to succeed or not, like that's not even part of the conversation. It's that like, are we as gamers being marketing manipulated into purchasing or being mad about something? And I do feel like that's actually one of the things that's playing out. I got a video going up hopefully about that later today on it. Cause it's, you know, it's like, it is a marketer's dream that you have these two sides that are just like, you know, slugging it out, because you couldn't ask for better marketing. You couldn't ask for like, even if one side's not buying your game, they haven't shut up about it. And so you're just blasting it out so that random person's like, oh, I didn't know Final Fantasy 16 came out on PC.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, I didn't know that game was out. I was busy doing all this other stuff. Oh, let me go see what the drama's about. It's like, you guys are selling, you guys are pushing game sales.
You know what the best marketing, in some ways, arguably, to maybe wrap it up, Concord ever had was finding out how badly it was doing. That they got the most eyes on it because of how bad it was doing. And really, there's an argument to be made that no marketing is worse than bad marketing. I mean, I'm sure there's obviously you can make ways in which that can cause permanent damage to a brand or what have you, but like in general, yeah.
Oh man, I saw some jokes about that. That was, I think, the memes. And then we see comedians actually doing spots for Bud Light now, and the commercials are funny. I was like, that's what I want for my Bud Light. I want to watch a commercial for a beer I don't drink and at least have a chuckle, you know? All right, Elio, where can people find you, sir?
Yeah, you can find us over at the Eorzean Archives, where I put out videos. I have been off on like a 6-month, 8-month hiatus, but actually will be finally putting out videos on in November. So probably this week we'll see them. I'm going to try to do a 7.1 review. That's where primarily most of the content's going on. We also do streams there, MSQ replays of 14. I might even finish up Dawn Trail and start again from scratch now with the... But you can also find us our Discord at discord.gg/Eorzean Archives. If you play 14, it's a great place to be. Talk about people about 14 stuff, lore, all that goodies, and also join us for all sorts of events.
And occasionally you find him here on the podcast as well. So we're glad to have you back, sir.
Yeah.
Thanks for talking some Monster Hunter with me. Thanks for talking Concord and
Yeah.
generally, I think I had probably the most fun when we got to talk shop about like these thoughts that it's like,
Always.
oh, yeah, I'm seeing this weird thing, and I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, that's why I always like when I get together with Chris for lunch, because like I'm noticing this. Like it's like, are you as well? Am I crazy? And it's like, yeah, that's what it is. All right, guys, thanks so much for tuning in. Be sure to check out Warriors in Archives and get some more Final Fantasy lore in your feed. I think that would be something that would be a big win, because when people say they want lore, they don't go watch it. Go watch it. Just if nothing else, like give him some support. He's definitely they put in,
or at least say what you want and then do actually watch the thing that you want. Comments and engagement.
Dude, hit that notification bell for these guys. Like if you like 14 lore, like the algorithm dictates if you live or die, and if you're not playing the game, then it's so easy to lose. But guys, we'll be back next week. We've been shooting for 11:30 every Friday, with some rare exceptions. And so far this year, we've been trucking along.
Yeah.
So we'll see if we don't hopefully lose it here in the 11th hour as we go into November. But thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll see you next week.